rubbish are you talking about?
We are not going to do that, period.
Why not?
You won't believe what I just heard.
Tell me.
This should be good.
That night under the mighty tree, something started that no rain could wash away. News ran through Benin with the speed of light. Boys who used to bow their heads when gangs passed now walked with their shoulders high. In Usalu Market, women selling tomatoes spoke Tosazi's name like a secret prayer. And the elders? They only sighed, shaking their heads. The ancestors don't wake again. But, my friends, fire does not burn without smoke, and smoke reaches the palace gates. In smoky bars and hidden shrines, gang leaders argued. Some spat with rage. He made us bleed. The chief's money means nothing if boys refuse to follow us. Others rubbed their chins, uneasy. This Osaze speaks truth. Even our own recruits are listening. Some skipped meetings last night to sit under that cursed baobab. For the first time, shadows quarreled among themselves. Knives that once pointed only outward now pointed inward. Brothers who once spilled blood together began to suspect each other. Ah, a house divided, my listener, is easier to pull down than a basket of yam from a tree. Chief Omoregi paced his mansion, sweat staining his agbada. Despite the cool evening breeze, his phone rang endlessly. Other politicians demanding answers. What is happening in Ugbowo? Why do I hear boys are chanting his name? Do you want Edo to burn before elections? The chief slammed his glass against the table, cracking it. This boy is nothing but dust, he growled. But even as he spoke, a sliver of fear slithered into his voice, because deep inside he knew. Dust, when stirred, can choke the mighty. 1 week later, something unthinkable happened. At Oba Market, when gang members tried to extort money from traders, the women resisted. They raised brooms, pestles, even hot pepper water, and drove the thugs away. Wasaz has shown us, they cried. Fear is dead. At night, boys who once scouted for gangs patrolled their neighborhoods instead, holding sticks and lanterns, chasing off thieves. They called themselves Omo Baobab, children of the Baobab. Songs began to rise. We no go fear again. Our land is ours again. Let the Baobab stand tall. We too shall stand. Benin City was trembling, not from terror this time, but from awakening. But shadows do not fade so easily. Scorpion, scarred and humiliated, returned from hiding with a vengeance. He gathered loyal men, armed them with fresh machetes, and swore an oath under moonlight. Says will not live to see another dawn, he vowed. His men echoed, their voices like snakes hissing in tall grass. And so, as the people's hope grew, so too did the fury of the shadows. It came suddenly. One hot afternoon, as Says addressed a gathering near Ring Road, Scorpion and his men stormed the crowd. Gunshots cracked the air. People screamed. Dust rose. But unlike before, the people did not scatter. They fought back. Sticks met machetes. Stones clashed with bullets. Shouts filled the air like war drums. Muge herself was seen pulling a wounded boy to safety, her wrapper torn, her face streaked with sweat and tears. And at the center, Zaz, bloodied but unbroken, raised his voice above the chaos. Benin belongs to us. If we fall, let it be standing. The cry spread like thunder. Boys, women, even elders joined the fray. And for the first time, gangs who had once owned the streets found themselves pushed back, bleeding, broken, humiliated. When silence finally returned, the ground was littered with blood and broken weapons. The city was wounded, yes, but also reborn. The people looked at one another and realized something powerful. They had faced the shadows, and the shadows had bled. Politicians trembled in their mansions. Gangs retreated to lick their wounds. And under the battered but unbroken baobab, Saz lifted his hands and declared, "This is not the end. This is the beginning. Tonight we have proven a truth. The people are stronger than their fear." And the crowd answered with one voice, a roar that shook the very heart of Benin. No more fear. The uprising had shaken Benin. The markets buzzed with stories of women chasing cult boys with brooms. At roadside joints, men clinked bottles of burukutu and swore they would never again pay street tax. Even bus drivers, once silent, shouted, "Saze dawn, open our eye. No more fear." But my listener, when a slave breaks his chains, the master does not clap for him. No, the master sharpens new chains. In a smoky meeting room inside a GRA mansion, Chief Omoregi sat with his allies. Their agbadas rustled like restless spirits. Faces hardened, lips thin with anger. "This boy must be silenced," one barked. "He has turned the people against us." Another hissed. "If the youths refuse to fight for us during elections, we are finished." The chief admitted, his voice heavy with dread. So, a decision was made, not with gongs or proverbs, but with whispers colder than grave soil. They would make an example of Saze. The days that followed were tense. Police trucks prowled the streets, not to protect but to intimidate. Curfews were whispered about. Known supporters of Saze were arrested on flimsy charges. Public disturbance, inciting riots, even witchcraft. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers avoided dark alleys. The laughter of children seemed muted. Yet under the baobab, boys still gathered, scarred, bandaged but unbroken. And there, Saz spoke words that carried the weight of iron. "They fear us because they know the truth. Without us, their power is dust. We are the roots. They are the branches. If the roots refuse to feed, the tree will starve." But hear this well, my listener. No kingdom falls without betrayal from within. Oga Iwinosa, childhood friend turned Nightcrawler's member, had watched the tides shift. In his heart was a war, loyalty to Saz, or loyalty to the gang that clothed him, fed him, gave him status. One night, as the moon hid behind clouds, Scorpion visited him. "You see how they praise Saz," Scorpion sneered. "But do they remember you? Do they chant your name? No, you are his shadow. Help us cut him down, and you will rise like a king." Greed is a soft chain, my listener. It binds tighter than iron. And so, Iwinosa whispered secrets, where a Sazi slept, who guarded him, when he would walk the narrow path near Ekiosa. It happened swiftly. Saz was returning from a meeting, his mind heavy with plans, his spirit burning with hope. Beside him walked two loyal boys, carrying only sticks. The night air was thick, heavy, waiting. Then, shadows leapt, guns flashed, machetes gleamed. Scorpion's men surrounded them like hungry wolves. The boys fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. Blades cut flesh, bullets cracked stone, blood spattered the red earth, and from the shadows, a familiar face appeared. "Iwinosa?" Asazi's eyes widened. "You." But Iwinosa did not answer. His silence was betrayal louder than any shout. They struck Orsazi down. A blow to his head, a cut to his side. His blood poured like libation to the ancestors. When dawn came, Benin woke to a rumor that spread faster than Harmattan fire. Zaze is dead. Women wailed. Boys clenched fists. Even hardened men wiped their eyes. Traders closed shops, not out of fear but mourning. At his mother Ago's stall, mourners gathered. She sat silent, eyes red, voice broken. My son carried fire in his mouth, she whispered, and they feared it more than his fists. Omuge knelt by her, tears streaming. She did not wail. Her silence was a dagger sharper than any blade. Ah, my listener, listen closely, for the ancestors do not waste vessels so easily. Yes, Saz was struck down. Yes, his blood fed the earth. But whispers began. Some swore they saw him carried away by faithful hands, half dead but breathing. Others claimed the palace priests had taken interest, that perhaps the Oba himself had sent secret healers. And so, a mystery was born. Was Saze dead, or merely hidden? One thing was certain. His spirit was not silenced. His words lived, his fire spread, his name became a chant that no bullet could kill. The politicians had bought themselves a false peace, but they had sown something far more dangerous than fear. They had sown martyrdom. And my listener, do you know the danger of killing a man who carries truth? His blood waters the soil, and in time, forests rise where one tree once stood. Benin City was no longer asleep. The people had paid in blood, and blood once spilled demands justice. The streets of Benin carried a strange silence after Sazi's fall. Not the silence of peace, no. This was the heavy, suffocating quiet of grief. Women tied black cloths on their heads. Boys who once swaggered with pride now walked slowly, eyes lowered. And yet, beneath that grief, something else smoldered. Anger. In Usalu, a trader swore she saw two boys carrying a bloodied figure through the alleys the night Saze was attacked. In New Benin, an old palm wine tapper insisted he heard a weak voice chanting, "No more fear, no more fear." The people began to murmur. Some said Sazi had died. Others whispered he was alive, hidden, recovering. And each whisper fanned the flames of hope, because, my listener, even a rumor can become a torch when people walk in darkness. At night, Muge sat by the baobab, staring at its massive roots as if waiting for them to speak. She refused to believe the man she loved was gone. Saz is not finished, she told the women who begged her to rest. His story cannot end with betrayal. Her faith became contagious. Boys who had been ready to surrender began patrolling again. Girls sang songs of defiance at the well. Traders shouted in the market, "If Zaz lives, we too must live boldly." Meanwhile, Chief Omaregi and his allies grew uneasy. If he is truly dead, why do they still chant his name? One politician asked. If he lives, then we are finished. Another muttered. So they sent spies. They bribed healers. They even consulted a juju priest who shook cowries and frowned. This boy's spirit cannot be tied, the priest warned. Kill him 1,000 times, and still his fire will burn. The chief cursed under his breath, but deep inside, a tremor of fear took root. Now hear this truth, my listener. Zaz was not dead. Yes, he was broken, his ribs cracked, his blood spilling. But loyal hands had carried him away from death's grip. They brought him to an old healer named Iyare, who lived by the edge of the forest, far from curious eyes. For weeks he drifted between life and death, his body trembling, his spirit wrestling. Sometimes he muttered words of fire, sometimes he cried out in silence. But Iyare worked with herbs, chants, and the patience of ancestors. "Rest, child of the baobab," she whispered as she rubbed his wounds with black seed oil. "Your fight is not yet done." One night, as fever burned him, Saze dreamed. He stood in a great courtyard, red earth shining under moonlight. Before him stood men in coral beads and leopard skins, the kings of old, the warriors of Benin past. One stepped forward, his voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "You have spoken truth to shadows, but truth demands sacrifice. Do not fear the wounds on your body. Fear only the silence of your people." Another added, "When blood falls on earth, it does not vanish. It becomes memory. It becomes power. Rise, child. The city still calls your name." Saz awoke drenched in sweat, but with fire in his eyes. Weeks later, gaunt but alive, Saz walked again. His limp was heavy, his scars deep, but his voice carried thunder. Under moonlight, he returned secretly to the baobab. Only a handful were there. Muge, a few boys, and his mother Ago. When they saw him, gasps filled the air. Some fell to their knees, others wept, others shouted. But Sazi raised a trembling hand. "I am not a ghost," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "I am flesh. I bleed. I hurt. But I rise. For you, for us." And his mother, tears glistening on her cheeks, whispered, "The ancestors have returned you to us." From that night, the city changed again. Quietly, carefully, word spread. "Saz lives. He is healing. He will return fully." And though the politicians raged and the gangs plotted, something irreversible had already happened. The people no longer whispered out of fear. They whispered with faith, because once a man returns from the edge of death, his voice is no longer just his own. It becomes the voice of every man, woman, and child who has ever suffered in silence. And in Benin, that voice was rising once more. Saz had returned, not just in flesh, but in spirit, in story, in fire. And when a voice returns from death, even shadows bow. The night was thick with crickets when Saz first stepped into the open again. He no longer walked with the careless stride of a street boy. No, his limp was heavy, his scars fresh. But his presence, it carried weight like thunderclouds before a storm. Word moved faster than Harmattan wind. Our Saz lives. At dawn, women in Oba Market tied wrappers tighter around their waists and sang old songs of defiance. Boys at Ugbowo carried sticks, not to extort, but to protect. Even drivers at Ring Road shouted to passengers, "Zazadeh alive-o! No more fear." The gangs felt it. Their grip weakened like rope fraying in fire. Shops refused to pay levies. Traders closed stalls at the sight of cultists, leaving them to walk through empty silence. An insult sharper than cutlass. And my listener, you must know, silence is sometimes louder than drums. When he finally addressed the people under the baobab, the crowd was larger than ever. Faces glistened with sweat, hope, and fear mingled together. Children perched on their mothers' backs. Even old men with walking sticks leaned forward to hear. Sais raised his scarred hands. "They thought my blood would silence me." He began, his voice low but steady. "But blood is a seed. When it touches earth, it grows. Look around you. What do you see?" Voices rose. "Courage, fire, unity!" "Yes," Saz thundered. "We are no longer pawns of shadows. We are no longer slaves of men in big houses who feast while we fight. Our chains are broken. Not tomorrow, not next year, but now." The cheer that followed shook the baobab itself. In the mansions of Gara, politicians gathered again. Chief Omoregi slammed his hand on the table, rattling glasses. "This boy refuses to die. Now he grows stronger. If we do not crush him, we are finished." But another politician leaned forward, his voice cautious. "Crush him, and he becomes a martyr again. Already the people chant his name in markets. Even police officers whisper it. We must be careful. The city is slipping from our fingers. The chief spat on the floor. Careful. You think power bows to boys with sticks? No. Power bends only to fire and money, and I have both. Yet even as he spoke, fear gnawed at his belly. Far from GRA, in a dark shrine where blood and gin mixed on the floor, Scorpion sharpened his machete. His face was a map of scars, his eyes burning with vengeance. They say he lives, Scorpion muttered. They say he gathers the people, one lieutenant replied. Then let us remind the people who owns these streets, Scorpion growled, and so he began to rebuild his army. Boys hungry for revenge, men desperate for money. But this time his war would not only be against Saze, no. He swore to set the whole city ablaze if he must. Beside Saze stood Muge, no longer just the tailor's daughter. She had become a voice of her own, organizing women, feeding the wounded, standing at Saze's side when he spoke. When some men mocked her presence, she silenced them with words sharper than knives. If you fear a woman's voice, then you fear truth itself, and truth has no gender. Ah, my listener, even shadows tremble when women rise. Soon neighborhoods began to form their own councils. Not secret cult meetings, but open gatherings where men and women decided together. No more street tax. No more kidnappings. No more silence. At night, instead of cult chants, songs of resistance echoed. We are the children of the baobab. We will not bow. We will not break. Shadows may come, but fire will rise, and the sun will shine again. The city had shifted. Fear was no longer king. But remember this, my listener. When fire spreads, it burns everything, good and bad alike. The gangs were cornered, the politicians desperate, the people fearless. 3 forces now prepared to clash, and in that clash, blood would flow again. Saz knew it. He felt it in his bones, in his scars, in the whispers of the ancestors that haunted his dreams. And so, he gathered his people one night and said, Darkness is thickest before dawn. The storm is coming. If we stand, we may bleed. If we kneel, we will die. Choose now. Will you be shadow, or will you be fire? The crowd roared their answer, and in that roar, destiny shook. The city of Benin had become a drum, beating with tension. Each street corner hummed with whispers. Each market carried rumors sharper than spears. Everyone knew Scorpion was coming. Under moonlight, Scorpion gathered his men. They wore red scarves, their machetes glistening with oil. Their chants were not songs but war cries. They marched through streets like locusts, breaking doors, setting fire to stalls, dragging out men who dared defy them. Tonight Benin will kneel, Scorpion roared, his voice cracking the night. But the people no longer cowered. Word spread fast. Saz and his council were waiting. By the great baobab, hundreds had assembled. Some carried sticks, some iron rods, a few rusty Dane guns passed down from ancestors. Women held kerosene lamps high, their faces fierce. Children were sent to hide, but even they peeped from behind mud walls, wide-eyed. Saz stood before them, machete in hand, not for show, but for survival. His scars caught the torchlight, and his voice cut the night like a blade. Shadows have ruled us for too long. Tonight we end it. They come with blood in their hearts, but we carry fire in our souls. Who will stand with me? The crowd roared, feet stamped, hands beat chests. The ground trembled. They met at Ring Road, the heart of the city. Flames from burning kiosks lit the roundabout. The Oba's statue loomed above, watching as sons of Benin turned the city into a battlefield. The first clash was thunderous. Machete against iron rod, stick against gunshot, Screams pierced the air, but so did chants of defiance. "Saz! Saze!" the people cried. Scorpion cut through the crowd like a demon, his machete flashing. But Saza faced him, steel in his eyes. In the chaos, Iwinosa appeared, the traitor who had once led Saze into an ambush. He fought on Scorpion's side, but when his eyes met Saze's across the flames, guilt struck like lightning. Moge's voice rang out from the crowd. "Iwinosa, you sold your brother for coins. How will history remember you? As a man or as a snake?" The words pierced deeper than any blade. Iwinosa froze, torn between shame and survival. His machete trembled, but Scorpion barked, "Strike him! Prove your loyalty!" The crowd watched, breathless. Would he kill Herzaz again, or redeem himself? Gunshots cracked from the rooftops. The Brotherhood reinforcements. Fear rippled. But Sez raised his voice above the noise. "Do not fear bullets. Fear silence. Tonight we fight not for one man, but for all generations to come." The people surged like a flood. Women hurled stones and hot pepper water from calabashes. Young men swung rods with fury. Even the elders struck with walking sticks, chanting ancient proverbs. The tree that shelters vultures will one day fall to the axe. Scorpion's men faltered. For the first time, shadows trembled. Then came the moment. Scorpion and Sez met in the burning roundabout. Machete against machete. Sparks flew. "You should have stayed dead, boy," Scorpion sneered. "And you," Sez grunted, blocking a strike. "Should have stayed in the shadows." The clash was brutal. Steel rang, blood spilled. Sez stumbled, his limp slowing him. Scorpion pressed harder, driving him back. But just as Scorpion raised his blade for the killing blow, Iwinosa stepped forward, tears streaking his soot-stained face. "No more," he whispered. With a roar, he drove his machete, not into Saze, but into Scorpion's side. Scorpion staggered, eyes wide in disbelief. Blood poured, his strength failing. Saz seized the moment, striking him down. The great Scorpion, Lord of Shadows, fell at last onto the burning ground. His men broke. Some fled, some surrendered, some lay silent forever. The crowd erupted, voices rising above the smoke and ash. "Freedom! Freedom!" But Saz did not celebrate. His eyes fell on Iwinosa, who dropped his weapon and knelt. "I betrayed you," Iwinosa said, his voice cracked with guilt. "But I could not betray my soul again." Saz stared long, then spoke. "Redemption does not erase scars, but it can heal wounds." The people murmured, moved by his mercy. By dawn, the fires at Ring Road were dying, but the city had changed forever. The shadows had been broken, not destroyed but weakened. Blood had watered the soil, and from it, courage had grown. But my listener, remember, when the lion falls, the hunters fight over its skin. With Scorpion gone, the politicians stirred, plotting their next move. For in every victory, another storm waits. The sun rose over Benin City, but it did not rise gently. Its light fell upon ashes, broken stalls, and blood-stained streets. The smoke of the battle at Ring Road still lingered, heavy like sorrow. Yet in the hearts of the people a different fire burned. Freedom. From Usalu to New Benin, from Sapel Road to Ugbowo, the cry spread like wildfire. "The shadows are broken. The people stand free." Women who had wept the night before now sang. Men whose backs had bent under fear now stood tall. Even children chanted Sazi's name, their voices echoing through alleyways. "Saz! Saz! Saz!" But victory carried its burden. The markets were scarred, homes destroyed, lives lost. Mothers searched for sons who would never return. Fathers dug shallow graves by lantern light. Freedom, my listener, is never free. It is bought with blood and bone. In the cool chambers of grey, the politicians trembled. No longer masters of puppets, their strings had snapped. Chief Omoregi paced his marble floor, sweat beading his brow. Scorpion is dead. The boy lives. The people chant his name in the streets. If this spreads, we are finished. Another politician spat bitter cola into a tray. We fed the night crawlers, and now the people know. If Saze turns his fire on us, who will shield us? They debated bribery, police raids, even assassins. But each plan crumbled like clay in rain, for power that is built on shadows cannot stand against the light of dawn. Beneath the baobab, the council gathered. Faces were tired, but eyes burned with determination. Muge stood at Saz's side, her voice strong. We have broken the brotherhood, but the root remains. The politicians who arm the nightcrawlers still feast in their mansions. Shall we fight forever, cutting branches while the trunk stands tall? The people turned to Saz. Would he call for vengeance, or for something greater? Saz raised his scarred hand. My brothers, my sisters, if we become like them, then we have already lost. We must not trade one shadow for another. Our fight is not to replace kings, but to end thrones of fear. The crowd murmured. Some hungered for blood. Others nodded, feeling the weight of his words. News spread that the people would march to GRA, not with weapons, but with voices. By the thousands they came. Traders, students, drivers, market women, even priests and pastors. Their chants rolled like thunder. No more shadows, no more chains, no more blood. The politicians peered from behind curtains, their walls shaking with the sound. Police stood aside, unwilling to strike their own people. Chief Omoregi stepped out at last, trembling in his agbada. What? What do you want? He stammered, and the people answered as one. Justice! Under the weight of the people's cry, the government cracked. Some politicians fled. Others were dragged into courts. Names were called, secrets exposed, hidden deals laid bare. The Brotherhood no longer had masters to feed them. Without money, without backing, they scattered like ants in flood. Some begged for forgiveness, some disappeared into villages. And in the heart of Benin, a new council rose, not of shadows, but of men and women chosen by the people themselves. As for Iwinosa, the betrayer who turned back at the edge of darkness, he did not vanish. He worked beside the people, building, repairing, seeking forgiveness not with words, but with sweat. Saz watched him one evening, carrying bricks for a new market stall. Why do you not rest? Saze asked. Iwinosa looked up, face streaked with dust. I rested while others bled. I will not rest again. And in that moment, redemption took root, even in soil once poisoned. My listener, the tale of Asaze is not just of gangs and blood. It is the tale of fire born in shadows, of a city that remembered its voice, of courage that outlived fear. Do you see it? The baobab still stands, its roots deep, its branches wide. Beneath it the people still gather. They tell the story of the boy who lived when he was supposed to die, who fought not for himself, but for all. And they end with a proverb. When the shadows gather, light a fire, for even the longest night must bow to dawn. Saze never crowned himself leader, never sought titles. He walked the streets as one of the people, scarred but unbroken. And in every corner of Benin, from the smallest alley to the grandest palace, his name became more than a name. It became a warning to oppressors. It became a song for the oppressed. It became a story a folk tale for the generations. And so I ask you, my listener, when your own shadows rise, will you bow, or will you burn with fire?